Today on With the First Pick, we are joined by Drew Rosenhaus. That's right. I'm Ryan Wilson. That's former Titans GM Rand Carthon. And Rand, everyone knows Drew is one of the biggest agents in sports. I feel like that does him something of an injustice. He's been doing this since 1989, back when he was still in law school at Duke. And you can't see it just off screen here. Drew, I have a 1982 UNC basketball championship poster signed by all those players. So I grew up in North Carolina. You're incredibly smart if you went to Duke. That doesn't mean I have to love the fact that you went to Duke, but that's when you started your career as a 22-year-old as an agent. And now you're one of the biggest names in the NFL. And Rand, I'll let you do the introduction because you certainly have a relationship with Drew from your time together doing contracts. But I'll ask you this, Rand, before we get going. How easy was it to negotiate with Drew? Because I would imagine that was no cakewalk.
Nah, and it's funny. Like I'm gonna give you the answer. I'm gonna give you the answer at the end of my intro here. I'm gonna answer that question at the end of your intro. But I just want to start off again. Thank you, Drew. Appreciate you being here, and just give you a little intro, to the show. He's negotiated over $10 billion in contracts. Yes, $10 billion. That's with a B. Has represented 4 Hall of Famers: Edgerrin James, Zach Thomas, Warren Sapp, Terrell Owens. And then has Frank Gore and Gronk coming. So those are going to be 2 additional Hall of Famers. He's an author. He's been an inspiration for movies. And like you said, Ryan, he's probably the most recognizable agent in the game. And to answer your question, in my experience, was by far and by large one of the easiest guys I've ever had to deal with when it comes to this agent, GM business. We're talking to the CEO of RSR, Rosenhaus Sports Representation. Drew Rosenhaus, appreciate you coming on. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us at With the First Pick podcast. Welcome, Drew.
Thanks, Rand. Thank you for the kind introduction. I really enjoyed working with you, Rand, and I'm sure I'll be working with you again in the future. You're terrific on your podcast, but I'd make a prediction, just like your predecessor, Rick Spielman, who's back in the NFL. You'll be back in the NFL soon as well. You're one of the more talented guys that I've dealt with. I really like your journey as a former player who worked his way up through the ranks as a scout, as an executive, to a general manager. You've been in some great organizations and learned from a lot of outstanding NFL executives. So when you asked me to come on, I was happy to do that because I have a lot of respect for you. And it's nice to meet Ryan. Ryan, you've had a long career, and it's interesting. The 2 helmets behind me, guys, I've got the University of Miami where I went to college and Duke where I went to law school. And that's really how I broke into business. Interestingly enough, when I was in college at the University of Miami, guys, I was there from 1984 to 1987, and they won 2 national championships during that period of time, and maybe had 50 guys drafted over that period of time as well, and absolutely dominated college football. And I became friendly with a lot of them. And this is a well-known story. It's documented, but Michael Irvin and I became very good friends, the Hall of Famer. And Michael and I were classmates and buddies, and he knew I wanted to become an agent. And when he got drafted, he got me an internship with his agent, guys. And this was back in 1988. I first got certified. I spent the summer interning with Michael Irvin's agents. And then when I went back to Duke for my second year of law school, I opened up my own agency. And my very first client was a player named Robert Massey, who was the 2nd-round pick by the New Orleans Saints, and he was from a small school called North Carolina Central, and they're in Durham, North Carolina, just like Duke. So I was a 22-year-old agent, and I somehow was able to persuade Robert Massey to hire me. And then when the guys from saw that I had a high draft choice, I was very fortunate. A lot of the Hurricane guys wound up hiring me, both out of college and in the NFL. So that's how I broke into the business. And being based here in South Florida, Rand is from this area as well. There's so much talent from South Florida. I've been very fortunate to work with so many great players. 2 of the guys behind Rand were South Florida guys, Edgerrin James from Immokalee, and Bobby McCray from Homestead were two of my retired clients that I represented that Rand knows well.
So Drew, like, I mean, because you hit it. I had the Robert Massey, because if I'm not mistaken, I think Robert Massey's now the head coach at Winston-Salem State, if I'm not mistaken. But like you said, you were 22 years old. You were just breaking into the business. Like, what was it that made you, like, that gave you the gumption to say, hey, I'm going for it? Because, I mean, I would imagine at this time, most of your clients, your early clients, were older than you. Like, what was it about you that allowed them to trust you and feel like you could get them to this next level?
You know, Rand, I think I took some chances, took some risks for any of our listeners or people who watch this. I took some chances that wound up paying off for me. For example, when I signed Robert Massey, I called ESPN and I spoke to the producer of the draft. At that time, it was Fred Gaudelli, who's now a famous producer for Sunday Night Football. And I said to Fred Gaudelli, Fred, I'm a young agent. You don't know me, but I'm at Duke Law School, and one of my clients is basically a classmate, if you will. Would you have an interest in doing one of your draft promotes in the 1989 draft from my dorm room in Durham, North Carolina? And he liked the idea, and he did it. And so it was original for a young agent to pitch this to ESPN and one of the remotes for the draft. This was before everybody had, Zooms and Skypes. It was a big deal. They sent a reporter down named Jimmy Roberts, who was a well-known anchor for them on Sports Center. And Jimmy was with us for the draft until Robert got drafted. And the way that helped me was in two areas. One, I was on the draft and every player watched that. So that gave me some legitimacy, guys, relative to the players I went to school with at UM, who were like, wow, I'm watching the draft and Drew's on there. And then the second part is I established a relationship with ESPN. And where that helped is they then did a feature on myself and Robert as two young people tackling the business. And even further, they did a Sunday night special on my negotiations with Jim Finks. So Jim Finks was the president of the Saints. He was the general manager, and ESPN behind the scenes did filmed my negotiations with Finks with Robert Massey. So that put me on the map, Rand. I think the way I became legitimized was really through ESPN, believe it or not, in those days. And it gave me a persona, a personality, allowed me to distinguish myself from the other agents in the business.
Hey, Rand, you know what's funny? I've actually gone back and watched some of those early ESPN draft coverages, and it's a completely different world than what the draft is now, because the draft is a 24/7 animal. And for Drew to be able to find his way onto that telecast when every single eyeball that cares about football is watching is a lot of forethought, I would say. The other thing I want to ask you, Drew, before Rand gets going here is it sounds like you knew what you wanted to do before you got to Durham to go to law school, but did you feel like you had to go to law school to be an agent, or was that perhaps a backup plan? Because a lot of times agents are lawyers, but you don't necessarily have to be, right?
The way I became an agent was I grew up in North Miami, a stone's throw away from St. Thomas University, where the Dolphins used to have their training camp. And my father used to take my brother and I to training camp. And we as fans, we developed a relationship with some of the Dolphin clients, just going out to practice, hanging out afterwards. In those days, it wasn't as formal as it is today. You could hang out with the guys, and a few of the Dolphin players would come over our house in North Miami and eat dinner with us, watch movies. In those days, it was VHS tapes. Their favorite movie was Caddyshack. I'm going back to the early to mid 80s now. And so I decided I wanted to be an agent because I was around all these players when I was growing up, and I really became fascinated with them, and that's where I did it. Now, to answer your second part of your question, it's very helpful to go to law school. To become an agent, to become certified with the NFLPA, you either have to have a postgraduate degree, like a law degree or a business degree, a doctorate, a business degree, master's, etc., or you have to have 5 years of work experience in the industry. So if you're going to become an agent, it's extremely helpful to have the law degree behind you. Not so much that you learn anything specific in law school to become an agent, because you really learn it on the streets. There's no book on how to be an agent. It's the school of hard knocks. And I can tell you guys, even for an agent that's had the run that I have over 37 years, I've had my share of disappointments and defeats. It's a very humbling business. I reached out to Rand when he left the Titans, and I said, hey, man, hang in there. You're definitely going to bounce back in the near future. This is a humbling business for all of us. And I've been humbled many times. And I said, hey, you may have moved on from the Titans, but I've been fired dozens of times in my career by my employers. So this business absolutely humbles you in a hurry.
So to go back to what you were saying and the, like Ryan said, the forethought of being able to reach out to ESPN. And we're talking about a young 22-year-old kid. Like you're saying, you're doing all these things from your dorm room. With that said, and me having gotten to know you and all the things you've done so far in your career, like, what would you say are your superpowers? Like, what makes Drew Drew?
Well, I'd say, for one, I love my clients, and it's genuine. My clients really are like family. I'd say I'd extend it that I have a love for the NFL, because it started when I was a young boy and I had a passion to be in this industry. So I would say the love of the game is one. And then the other would be the work ethic, Ran. And I'd say the third is just the ability to communicate. I was raised by my parents to communicate with people with respect, with consideration, with patience, with poise. I think that really helps when you're an agent, both in terms of recruiting, managing relationships, dealing with NFL executives, negotiating contracts, being a good communicator, being a nice person, being caring. And look, I've evolved. I've come a long way. I'm looking around here. I've got the cover of Sports Illustrated in 1996. I was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as the most hated man in the NFL. That was the caption. And that was just young me breaking into the business. But I've smoothed out a lot over 37 years. And I've realized that you get a lot more with sugar than you do with salt as a negotiator. And you can accomplish a lot more for your clients as an advocate by working well with their employers and getting along with the teams and being very respectful.
So you kind of, it was a good segue in talking about going from the cover, and then I can throw in, I think you might be the only agent that has ever graced the cover of Sports Illustrated. But you said you went from being seen as the most hated man in the NFL, and you understanding that and saying that you've evolved. So with that evolution, like, what would you say is the biggest misconception about Drew and what you stand for?
I think the biggest misconception is my persona. Perhaps if I go on Twitter or I look at social media, people will make it seem like I'm all about money and all about making money and all about getting money for my clients and being rich and things of that nature. And that's not true at all. I could have done a lot of other things and made more money than what I'm doing now as a graduate of Duke Law School. I do this because of my desire to help people. I love the fact that as an agent, Rand, I'm able to help my clients. I've represented well over 1,000 players in the NFL in my career. And you think of all the families that and people that's impacted, children, grandchildren, parents, grandparents. all the charitable things that my clients do, all the ways that they give back, all of the things that they do as a role model. I really love the ability to impact society in my chair as an agent. That is very meaningful. I feel like if I could look back, my favorite thing are all the people that I've been able to help in a positive way.
Yeah, so it was impressive for me, like in doing the research for this interview, and pull the full client list. And I'm looking at it on my phone, and I have to keep doing this because the number. And when I saw over 1,000 guys, I was like, "There's no way this document is right." And so I had to refresh and use some of my NFL contacts, and it was just truly impressive just seeing that you represented over 1,000 guys, and some of the names on the list, whether they're Hall of Famers or not. There's a ton of Pro Bowlers, ton of All Pros, and just ton of just really good football players that didn't necessarily get the recognition that they deserved on a bigger platform. But you talked about it earlier, and you were just saying in your answer that the biggest misconception is people saying that you care only about money.
Right.
And you said that was a misconception. Like, I just
Yes.
remember, and this is more of a kudos to you, but I remember as a player when guys wanted to get a deal done, whether they were with someone else, they came to Drew Rosenhaus, they came to RSR, and to get that deal done. Like, for our listeners, can you just allow us in the room or on the phone with you and give us like what that preliminary conversation is like between you and your client when you're approaching trying to get a new deal or an extension done?
Absolutely. When I talk to players about hiring me to represent them in a negotiation or to work on a new contract, one of the things that I fall back on is my experience. The greatest thing that I can bring to a negotiation is perspective, since this is 37 years that I've been doing this. So when a client hires me, I'm able to bring a unique perspective over decades when it comes to getting a new contract for them. So one, helping them formulate what their value is, and helping them understand what type of contract they have earned or deserve, then helping them understand the dynamics involved, the team they're dealing with, what that team's history is like, where they are from a salary cap perspective, how motivated they are to do a deal, what's our leverage. Teams have a lot more leverage than players do. When a player's under contract. When a player's a free agent, it's awesome. If you're a good player and you're in free agency, it's a bidding war and you have a ton of leverage. But when you're under contract and you're working on getting a guy a raise, it's really an uphill battle. And you do tap in on your experience. You've got to find a way to make sure both sides feel it's a win-win. A team is not going to rip up a client's contract unless I can reach an agreement with them where they feel it is in their best interest as well. There are no unilateral deals on extensions. They're bilateral. They help both sides. They're good for the player. They're good for the team. And having the ability to find that deal that works for your client, but also makes sense to the team is one of the things that I emphasize to my clients. And because I've negotiated, hundreds of contract extensions in my career, I do bring a skill set to any scenario, and I'm not afraid to get into difficult negotiations. Last year, I took on really what a lot of people thought was an impossible scenario with Reddick. Reddick was with another agency. He held out into the season, seeking a new contract. He had accumulated $14 million worth of fines. His agency at the time terminated him as a client, basically let him go for whatever reason. He was without an agent. The Jets had all these fines. And I went to work for Haason. And there were friends of mine who said, "You're crazy. You can't win on this. Like, what are you doing?" And I said, "Well, aren't we in this job to help guys figure it out, get them through tough situations?" And first I had to talk to Haason and say, "Haason, this holdout is not going to be effective. So let's make up our mind that under a certain scenario, you're going to go back to work." So number one, I had to reach that agreement with Haason, and obviously that hadn't happened at any point prior to that. Two, I had to reach an agreement with the Jets that was satisfactory. And the agreement that we reached was that they waived about $12 million in fines that was conditional on Haason reporting and doing his job, honoring the rest of his contract. And it worked out great for Haason. And it worked out great for the Jets, because who knows where this would have gone. Haason came back within 1 week of him hiring me. He was playing for the Jets. And Haason just signed a 1-year deal with Tampa that can be worth as much as $14 million. So a happy ending. I'm pleased to have been involved in a very difficult one where I had to work with Woody Johnson, the owner, Joe Douglas, the GM, Nick Sabella, the head of their salary cap department, and figure it out, and we did. So I'm proud of that. But that's an example, guys, of, you know, getting involved and how you help players, not only in easy scenarios, but difficult ones. Every year, you know, right now, Rand, you know this, almost every negotiation that I'm involved with right now in June is a tough one. Otherwise, it would have been done. Right?
Hey, Rand, can I
it
ask
would have
you a
been
quick
done
follow-up?
sooner.
Yeah, go ahead.
It's funny that you're talking about what you're talking about and the importance behind the scene of the offer, Drew, because one of the things that I've thought about both this draft cycle and also with veterans who are in the league who've had good seasons and good careers to date that don't have agents. And sometimes it works out, and other times you wonder if an agent would have been beneficial in certain situations that the player may not have been familiar with, or they're in waters where they're not familiar. I know where you're coming from on this because you've made a career out of this, but is there opportunity to have success without an agent in terms of negotiating this deal, or is it typically in your best interest to have someone take care of that part of your job for you?
Well, I'll say this in an unbiased capacity. I do think having an agent is very beneficial. And I say this unbiased. You know, for the percentage that we get, I don't see a downside in having someone, whether it's going into the draft or doing a veteran negotiation. An agent can help prepare players for the draft. An agent can help players prepare for interviews. An agent can help prepare players for the workouts, for the Senior Bowl, for the Combine, for the Pro Day, to manage injuries, to talk to teams and answer any questions they might have about their legal background. For example, Abdul Carter was one of our clients in the draft this year, and I'm sure Abdul would tell you the value that I brought in helping him become the third pick of the draft, because he was dealing with a stress reaction at the Combine. He wasn't able to work out at the Combine. He wasn't able to work out at his Pro Day. A lot of teams felt like he would need surgery. There was a lot of media attention. Just managing all of that for Abdul and dealing with the teams, I know for a fact was very productive. As far as veterans, it is a very delicate process that Rand knows. You know, when you're talking to players, players have to make an argument that they deserve the maximum amount of money, and teams have a salary cap that they have to manage, and they have to be disciplined, and they have to make it work with 90 players on a roster. And so a lot of the conversation is, look, you know, you're not worth the money that you're asking for, or we can't pay this to you. And that can be very awkward. So when you're able to have those discussions with agents instead of directly with the player that you work with, the good agents will soften that and keep it positive and keep it moving in a good way. For me, we have 7 or 8 guys right now that we're working on contract extensions for, and we want every one of them to be in a positive place with their teams. So I'm working at that to the best of my abilities, even the most difficult circumstances.
So you mentioned that you guys had Abdul Carter this year that went 3rd overall, and you also had Josh Simmons who went 32nd overall. He's another guy that had he been healthy, we're probably looking at a top 10, definitely a top 15 pick. Who we had a lot of love for here on With the First Pick podcast.
Yep.
But we're talking about from 1989, right? And my son asked me, he was like, what was it like being born in the 1900s, right? So we see the disconnect, from this generation. But we're talking about from 1989 to now 2025. Like, how have you and your team, which includes your brother Jason and Robert Bailey and Dwayne Starks and among many other people, it's like, how have you guys been able to evolve and still remain relatable to the modern day athlete?
That's a great question, because I'm 58 now. And when I started out, I was 22. And in those days, I would go out with them. We'd be in the nightclubs. We would go to strip clubs together. I mean, we could hang out. I'm different now. I'm a father. I've got 4 little kids. So those days are pretty much over for me in terms of my relationship with my clients. But I stay relatable really by way of just being genuine. I do think I'm young at heart. I do think I'm a big kid. I still play video games. Seriously, I still enjoy hanging out with young people. I don't feel my age. I think it's about being relatable. Also, hiring young people to work for you. We just hired a young man named Derek Wingo, who was out of the University of Florida, like you ran. He was a linebacker. He went to St. Thomas University down here in Fort Lauderdale. He's an aspiring agent. He's only 23 years old. So he just joined Rosenhaus Sports. And that's also part of it, right? Having people work for you, especially with NIL right now. On Saturday, I met with a client who's 17 years old, who's still in high school, named Jackson Cantwell. Met with he and his parents. He was down here visiting the University of Miami. So I'm now recruiting 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds. We have clients in the NIL space that are teenagers. So to stay relatable, it's really just being able to be honest with them, genuine with them, be fun, laugh, joke around, and not be boring. I just think being funny and telling them jokes, telling them fun stories. Like when I sat with Jackson, I told him really funny stories about me in the early days dealing with T.O. and Antonio Brown and Chad Johnson and Warren Sapp and a lot of the iconic guys that I work with that were really known for their personalities. You can imagine being their agents, some of the interesting things that, we experience, like Warren Sapp was a dynamic player, but he was also a dynamic personality. And I had a great relationship with him. But a lot of other people had a hard time relating to him when he played. For me, it was easy. But I had a lot of fun working with a lot of these larger than life guys. Gronkowski, for all of his persona in the media today and in the real world, he was just the most likable, down-to-earth guy you could possibly want to hang out with. Just a big, fun guy that you could kid around. And Rob and I never spent a minute where we weren't laughing and joking about something. So that's a long-winded answer to it, Rand. Your clients have to be your friends.
So, you're already talking to 17-year-olds, NIL kids, which is mind-blowing to me, right? But one of the questions I was thinking about as you were talking about, I mean, you're in a hotbed of talent in Miami, and as Coach Howard Schnellenberger framed it, years ago when he took over that program, the state of Miami, right? And so pre-NIL, was there ever a player that came across your mind? You saw him play, whether it was on the news, you saw him play live, where you were like, man, like I'm gonna have to represent this kid one day.
Yeah, for sure. I can't tell you how many young people that I've watched that were kids of my clients. Like, we represent a retired client, Brett Perryman, and I remember very young watching his son playing football. I knew he was an immensely talented guy, and Brett's son, one of his sons, was Brashard Perryman, and Brashad became a first-round pick and played almost as long as his dad did. And I remember watching Brashad play as a little guy and saying, wow, Brett, I'm going to have to work with your son. So, yeah, this happens all the time nowadays. And, definitely being here in South Florida, I go to high school games and you watch some of these youngsters play. I remember going to Pee-wee games and watching guys. I've had clients come up to me. I'll give you an example. There's a player I represent named Josh Metellus. And Josh Metellus is a really fine safety with the Minnesota Vikings. He's a team captain. He's from Fort Lauderdale. And I went to a client's football camp, and the way Josh's mom tells it, Josh was a young man, maybe 5 or 6 years old, and met me and said, hey, one day I'm going to be your client. Lo and behold, here he is. He's a client. I can't tell you how many future clients I've met going to these football camps here in South Florida. And Rand, this talent's crazy. It's not just Miami. I was just in Port St. Lucie and Vero Beach and Fort Lauderdale. Really, all of Florida is my stomping grounds. I recruit throughout the state and have been very fortunate to represent a lot of great Gators, your alma mater, great Seminoles, great Hurricanes, players from FIU, FAU, UCF, USF. Florida's been amazing for me.
You hear that, Ryan? The hotbed of talent that is the great state of Florida.
I was going to ask Drew. I went to college William Mary. You got any college William Mary guys you rep?
No, but I did recruit a player from William and Mary this year. Charles Grant, I believe his name. He was an offensive lineman. So we did recruit him, and I believe he was a William and Mary guy.
Absolutely. Number 99 overall to the Las Vegas Raiders. Very smart young man. I had a chance to talk to him. I was not very good at school, Drew, but that's a conversation for another time.
I have had a lot of clients from the Virginia schools over the years, but and a lot of great clients from the state of Virginia, including Plexico Burris and many others. But, Ryan, I've been doing this so long and I've represented so many players. I bet if I went back and I looked through my entire clientele, there's probably a William and Mary guy in there. It just doesn't come to mind off the top of my head.
I'll take it. I'll take the Charles Grant. I'm happy with that. That's a start, Rand. You got to start somewhere.
So, Drew, you've had some memorable moments throughout your career, right? I mean, let's talk. I mean, the Willis McGahee fake phone call in the draft.
Was it fake though? Is it confirmed fake?
Yeah, it was.
Okay.
I mean, I apologize to Tom Donahoe. He was the legendary NFL executive who at the time was the GM of the Bills, Ran. And real quick, just to tell that story, ESPN was at my house with Willis McGahee, and Willis, they kept showing Willis, and Willis was just kind of sitting there looking sad. And as they talked about Willis, they put the camera on him. And it occurred to me that why don't I get Willis on the phone the next time ESPN goes to him? Because in those days, guys only used the phone during the draft if they were talking to a team. So I said, Willis, the next time ESPN does a live hit to show you, I'm calling you. And I did. And I called Willis, and ESPN showed Willis on the phone. They didn't say who he was talking to. And Tom Donahoe called me and said, hey, who's Willis talking to? And I said, well, Tom, I can't tell you that. That's confidential. He said, is it a team? I said, look, I'm not going to say whether it's a team or not, but I think you need to take Willis as soon as possible. He said, well, do you anticipate him getting drafted anytime soon? Are you getting calls from people telling you that you could get picked? And I told him I thought we were going to get picked soon. And I don't know if it was because of that phone call or maybe they saw him on the phone, but they ultimately drafted him with the 23rd overall pick. And a lot of people thought that was good agent work, but definitely joked about it a lot with Willis over the years and with Tom Donahoe.
And then even off of that, the TO front yard workout press conference, you've had a litany of these type of experience. Like you mentioned the guys, Chad and Big Sap and Gronk and all these big, larger than life personalities.
Yeah.
But what's been like one of your most memorable moments that you've had, as an agent working with all those different clients that you've had?
You know what? There's so many great ones, Rand. And I'll just give you an example. Like it has to be draft day, and I would say go back to 1991. I'm a young agent. I'm a Dolphin fan at the time. I'm a graduate of the University of Miami, and I'm representing Randall Thrill-Hill, who went to Killian High School in South Miami, who went to the University of Miami. Our draft party was in Dolphin Stadium in a suite. They happened to offer up, they wanted local guys there for the draft, and the local media's there. And lo and behold, legendary coach Don Shula calls Randall Hill and says to Randall, with the 21st pick, we're going to take you. And that was a real highlight for me, Rand, because I was a very young agent. I was only in, my third or fourth year. And to see a guy like Randall go to the Dolphins, be a first-round pick from the University of Miami, it was just a real highlight. I'd say there's so many draft day ones, in particular. Maybe signing a guy like Marvin Jones in 1993. I was a really young agent. And to sign a guy that young who was that good, he was the fourth pick of the draft. He was the first defensive player drafted. That was really a thrill. Just things that are affiliated with your clients that feel so great, A highlight was really when the Dolphins traded for Tyreek. That was really cool, to be a part of a epic trade to my hometown team with such an exciting football player. I'm really glad. My dad was a lifelong Dolphin fan and got to experience that. And he passed away shortly afterwards, unfortunately, but I was really glad he got to be a part of that. So, sharing things with clients and family really are the things that stand out to me.
Gotcha. Nah, so to cap off this part, because we're going to bring the main part of the interview to a close, and we're going to do a rapid fire session after this one. That'll be really fun. So my final question of this part is, what's next for Drew Rosenhaus and RSR?
That's a good question, Rand. I certainly can't tell you how many challenges exist today. Now you're recruiting high school players, freshmen in college. You're working hard for guys with NIL before they get to the NFL, really before you even know if they're an NFL prospect. This is the most challenging time to be an NFL agent because of all the juggling that you have to do recruiting players that you did in the past, college juniors, college seniors, maintaining your relationships with NFL guys, all the off the field work, marketing and in the community. But now you got to bring in all these high school and college clients. For us, we've really had to expand. We've really had to change our business. I'm the, one of the owners of Rosenhaus Sports, along with my brother Jason. And, we're very different than like CAA or an Athletes First, where there's, so many different agents and different sports involved. We're more of a family run organization. So we have to adjust here to this influx of clients. That's the challenge.
So this next section we like to call On the Clock. I got 5 quick rapid fire questions for you. They're fun, so it's nothing too crazy. My first question, and you've mentioned some of these guys earlier, but you got to pick one. Biggest personality of all your clients?
Biggest personality have to be. I'm going to say, because I don't want anybody to feel bad, but Gronk is up there. Let me put it to you that way. Chad Johnson is up there for sure. I mean, these guys have such personalities that it was really fun being around them at all times.
Draft day ritual. What's your draft day ritual?
Draft day ritual, it's really been in the green room the last several years on day 1. Day 2, it's going to be with a client and his family that we project to get drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round. Day 3 is to go be with a client and or clients or families that we anticipate getting drafted rounds 4 through 7. But, the ritual is really calling all your clients and their families, updating them, and then also touching base with the teams that are most likely to draft them to find out how's it looking.
What athlete from another sport would you love to sign?
Yep. I'm a football guy, but we're also we have a baseball division. So I have to be careful. So I'll mention, let's just roll with Michael Jordan. That would have been a thrill to be Michael Jordan's agent.
That would have been enough to retire on, being his agent. If you could pick a song that best describes you, what song would it be and why?
A song. Well, one of my favorite songs, ironically, and this isn't meant to, I love Rocky. I've got the Rocky statue right behind me, and there's a song from Rocky, the theme, Gonna Fly Now, and it's really tells Rocky's story. There's times where it says it's hard, the training's hard, life's hard, a lot of adversity. Don't give up, keep fighting. And at the end, really feels good about his effort and where he's at with what he made of himself. So I'd have to say Gonna Fly Now by Bill Conti on the Rocky soundtrack.
And then the final one, if you had to be a football player for one day, what position would you play?
It'd have to be a quarterback. I mean, let's face it, I represent all the positions and they're all cool, but, just being a quarterback, that is very unique. I think that's would probably be the most fun to play.
Hey, Drew, let me add one quickly. A couple of things that came to mind when you were talking about speaking with the teenagers now about NIL and trying to be relatable. It's funny to me, Rand, that Jerry Maguire, I think, is based on Drew. I think that's fair to say. That movie came out in the 90s, and I'm sure some of these young guys don't know who Jerry Maguire is. They may not know who Tom Cruise is, which is sort of funny. That movie was sort of seminal for people who probably got interested in being an agent and playing football. But the question I wanted to ask you, Drew, was what's one of the craziest places or scenarios in which you were able to get a deal done for one of your clients?
Crazy scenario in which I was able to get a deal done. Well, there's been a lot of them. Let's just go back to the T.O. one, where when T.O. hired me, it's 6 years left on a contract with the Philadelphia Eagles, and Andy Reid, who I absolutely have all the respect in the world for, he and the organization had no interest in ripping up a deal with 6 years left. It's understandable. So then we went through this dynamic where they suspended him, then released him, and then of all teams, he went from the Eagles to the Cowboys with Jerry Jones and Bill Parcells as his head coach. So just dealing with Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers like Howie Roseman, Andy Reid, current Hall of Famers, Bill Parcells, Terrell Owens, and Jerry Jones, that was a really wild negotiation. That was a saga.
I can only imagine, especially with Coach Parcells and dealing with that. But now, Drew, man, we really appreciate the time. I know you got a lot going on. Appreciate you thinking enough of us to, spend some time with us today, and appreciate your transparency. Like I always like to say, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us on With the First Pick podcast. So we appreciate you joining us, Drew.
Yeah, Rand, I've always had a real fondness for you, and you've been great for the game. You represent what's best about the NFL. You've contributed so much as a player, as a scout, helping young men, as a general manager. You've done it the right way. I'm glad you're staying close to the game with CBS Sports, and like I said before, I'm very confident you'll be a GM one day if that's what you choose to do, because the NFL is a better place with you in it.
I appreciate that, brother. I really do.
I don't know what that means for With the First. I don't know what that means for With the First Pick, Drew, but I'm excited about what the future holds for Rand as well.
You know what? You keep going, Ryan. I'm not sure how long you're going to be able to keep your partner here. The NFL is going to be calling to get this guy back if they aren't already.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. And I have been incredibly blessed to work with Rand. I give him a hard time, but he is good luck finding a better human being. But Drew, I appreciate your time as well. It was great to get to know you, and I appreciate that you're being candid with so many great things in your past. And again, I want to reiterate, Rand, I'm not going to hold the fact that Drew went to Duke against him. Okay.
That's right. Well, I have a lot of UNC clients that I've represented, so we have that in common, Ryan. Okay.
Thank you so much,
Carolina fan.
Take
care, guys. All the best.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.